Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The banquet hall was alive with music, laughter, and the hum of countless conversations blending into a vibrant symphony. The soft clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter added to the atmosphere of opulence. Yet for Matthew Matt Giordano, the splendor of the evening faded into insignificance. He shouldn't have been there. Clara had made that clear. It's just a work event, nothing exciting, she'd said, brushing off his interest. But Matt had insisted. I've been working insane hours, Clara. Can't I spend one evening with you? She'd reluctantly agreed, but her discomfort had been palpable. Now, standing near the edge of the ballroom, Matt felt like an outsider in his own life. Clara was stunning in her deep emerald gown, her tall figure commanding attention as she floated from one conversation to the next. Her laughter, melodic and warm, seemed to draw everyone closer. But it wasn't her charm or beauty that set Matt's teeth on edge. It was the man who hovered near her like a moth to a flame. Ryan Prescott. The name alone made Matt's stomach churn. He had only heard about Ryan in passing, a charismatic project manager with a reputation for being too friendly with female colleagues. Tonight, Matt saw it all in action. The way Ryan leaned in too close, the way his hand lingered on Clara's back a fraction too long, the conspiratorial smiles they shared. Matt tightened his grip on his glass, trying to steady the storm brewing inside him. He was no stranger to Clara's allure. From the moment he'd met her, he'd been captivated by her confidence and magnetic presence. But tonight, that magnetism wasn't directed at him. His thoughts spiraled, pulling him back to the subtle signs he'd been ignoring for months. The frequent late nights, the vague explanations, the sudden business trips. A nauseating realization took root. Something wasn't right. Matt excused himself, weaving through the crowd to the bar. As he waited for the bartender, his mind raced, replaying every suspicious moment. The bartender placed a neat glass of bourbon in front of him, but Matt barely noticed. Across the room, Clara's laughter rang out again. It was a sound he used to treasure, but now it grated on him. He turned back to the bar, his reflection staring at him from the mirror behind the shelves. "Am I crazy?" he muttered under his breath. The reflection didn't answer, but he already knew. He wasn't crazy. The confirmation came moments later. Clara and Ryan had moved to a quieter corner of the room. Matt followed, keeping his distance. His heart pounded as he watched Clara lean closer to Ryan, her hand brushing his arm. The way they looked at each other, there was no mistaking it. It wasn't the polite camaraderie of co-workers. It was intimacy. Something inside Matt snapped. The love he'd poured into their 6-year marriage, the sacrifices he'd made to build a future for them, it all felt like a cruel joke. He gritted his teeth and stepped back into the shadows, his mind already forming a plan. That night, when Clara climbed into bed beside him, Matt didn't confront her. Instead, he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "You're amazing tonight," he murmured. Clara stiffened slightly before relaxing into his embrace. But in his mind, he whispered a promise. "You'll regret this." The next morning, Clara left for work early, leaving Matt alone in their sunlit kitchen. The smell of her perfume lingered in the air, sharp and cloying. He stared at his untouched coffee, his jaw clenched. Her good morning kiss felt hollow now, her cheerful "have a great day" grating against his nerves. Matt didn't waste time. The moment her car disappeared down the street, he made his first call, to Marcus Ward, a private investigator recommended by an old friend. "I need answers," Matt said when Marcus picked up. "Can you handle discreet surveillance?" "Evidence collection." Marcus chuckled, the sound low and gravelly. "That's my specialty." "Who's the target?" "My wife, Clara Giordano." The words tasted bitter on his tongue, but Matt forced them out. "I need to know everything. Where she goes, who she's with." "Understood. Text me her details, and I'll get started. You'll have your answers soon." Hanging up, Matt felt a mix of guilt and relief. He didn't want to be the man who spied on his wife, but Clara's betrayal left him no choice. He wasn't just fighting for answers. He was fighting for his dignity. By Wednesday, Marcus delivered the first report. Matt sat in his car, gripping the file with trembling hands. The evidence was damning. Photos of Clara and Ryan leaving the office together, heading to a small cafe where they sat far too close, laughing like lovers sharing a private joke. A time-stamped video showed them entering Ryan's townhouse late one evening, Clara's hand resting intimately on Ryan's arm. Matt's chest tightened. He flipped through the photos again, his vision blurring with anger. Clara hadn't just lied. She'd made a fool of him. That night, Matt confronted her. "Busy day?" he asked casually as Clara entered the house, kicking off her heels. "Exhausting," she sighed. "Work's been so crazy lately. I could use a vacation." Matt's lips twitched, but he forced a smile. "You deserve one. Maybe you can take Ryan along. I hear he's a good travel companion." Clara froze mid-step, her face draining of color. "Well, what are you talking about?" Matt's smile vanished. He tossed the file onto the coffee table, the damning photos spilling out. Clara's eyes widened, her breath hitching. "You thought I wouldn't notice?" Matt's voice was calm, too calm. "Late nights, business trips, and now this." He gestured to the photos. "Did you think I'd be too blind or too trusting to see the truth?" Clara's lips trembled as she tried to form a response. "Matt, save it." His voice cut through her stammering. "I don't want your excuses. I want you out of my house and out of my life." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, but Matt felt no sympathy. "Not anymore. You've made your choice, Clara. Now you'll face the consequences." For the next week, Matt moved with a singular purpose. He quit his job, ensuring Clara's infidelity wouldn't overshadow his professional reputation. He hired an attorney, filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. But Matt wasn't satisfied with just ending the marriage. He wanted Clara and Ryan to feel the weight of their actions. "Let's get creative," Matt told Marcus over drinks one evening. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Creative how?" Matt leaned in, his voice low. "Ryan Prescott is a predator. He's not just cheating with Clara. He's a repeat offender. I want his world to crumble." Marcus grinned. "Now we're talking. What's the plan?" "I need you to dig deeper into Ryan's past. Find his weaknesses, his vices. And find me someone who can help take him down." The wheels were set in motion. Matt reached out to Evelyn James, an escort he'd met during his separation. Evelyn was more than just a pretty face. She was sharp, resourceful, and discreet. When Matt explained his plan, her eyes gleamed with mischief. "You're playing dirty," she said with a smirk. "I like it." With Evelyn's help, Matt crafted the perfect trap. Ryan's arrogance made him an easy target. Evelyn approached him under the guise of a lonely traveler at a bar, drawing him in with practiced ease. By the end of the night, Ryan was in her hotel room, completely unaware of the hidden camera recording their every move. Matt watched the footage later, his jaw tightening with satisfaction. But this was just the beginning. For the next 2 weeks, Matt refined his plan, his determination fueling every step. Ryan Prescott wasn't just going to suffer personal embarrassment. His professional life and carefully cultivated image would crumble. With Marcus and Evelyn working as his allies, Matt orchestrated a scheme so intricate that there would be no escape for Ryan or Clara. The first phase had gone off without a hitch. Ryan's tryst with Evelyn was not only captured on film, but also carefully documented in still photos. But Matt wanted more than a scandal. He wanted ruin. "Got something for you," Marcus said, sliding a slim folder across the table as they sat in Matt's dimly lit living room. Ryan's been skating on thin ice at work for years. Apparently, his extracurricular activities haven't gone unnoticed. Matt flipped through the folder. Inside were reports from employees at Ryan's company. Complaints of inappropriate behavior, unwanted advances, and favoritism. None of it had ever made it past HR, thanks to Ryan's smooth-talking charm. "This is perfect," Matt said, his voice cold. "Figured you'd like it," Marcus replied with a grin. "But there's more. He's got a pattern." Lisa Hayes wasn't the first woman he ditched when something shinier came along. There's a string of them, all pissed off and more than willing to talk. Matt's mind raced. A pattern of behavior would add weight to his revenge. "Can you get me in touch with a few of them?" "Already did. Lisa Hayes is chomping at the bit. And there's another, Vanessa Reed. She's still seething over how he ghosted her after a 6-month relationship. Matt leaned back, his hands steepled. Good. Let's bring them in. Meanwhile, Clara's once confident exterior had begun to fracture. She had moved into a small apartment after Matt served her with divorce papers, but her attempts to reach him were met with cold indifference. The few friends she confided in were sympathetic, but offered little comfort. You need to fix this, one friend said over coffee. Matt's not a bad guy. Maybe you should try counseling. Clara shook her head. He won't even speak to me. And I don't think I can fix it. I've ruined everything. Her guilt gnawed at her, but she still clung to Ryan. He was her anchor now, the one who had promised her excitement and passion. But even that relationship felt hollow. Ryan's charm was growing thin, his affection laced with a smug superiority that grated on her nerves. I gave up my marriage for this? Clara muttered to herself late one night, staring at the empty wine glass in her hand. Matt waited for the perfect moment to deploy the next stage of his plan. He contacted Lisa and Vanessa, meeting them in a quiet cafe. Both women arrived ready to vent their frustrations. Lisa was sharp and fiery, her disdain for Ryan palpable. Vanessa, more reserved, nodded along as Lisa recounted her experiences with him. He's a manipulative jerk, Lisa said, her voice rising. Always dangling promises, making you feel special, then tossing you aside like yesterday's trash. Sounds like you're not alone, Matt said, sliding a folder across the table. It contained Evelyn's photos of Ryan and a carefully curated dossier of his indiscretions. Lisa's eyes widened as she flipped through the folder. Is this? It's real, Matt said. And I need your help to make sure everyone knows who Ryan Prescott really is. Vanessa hesitated. What are you planning? Matt's voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. Exposure. His fiancée, his co-workers, his bosses. Everyone is going to see him for who he is. With Lisa and Vanessa's cooperation, Matt prepared a damning package to send to Ryan's employer. It included a detailed letter outlining his history of misconduct, statements from Lisa and Vanessa, and the photos of Ryan with Evelyn. Matt also crafted an anonymous email to Clara, attaching the same photos. The email was blunt. Mrs. Prescott, I thought you should know what your husband has been up to. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Maybe it's time you got tested. Finally, Matt enlisted Evelyn for one last act. She contacted Ryan, pretending to want another meeting. This time, she recorded their phone call, where Ryan bragged about his ability to juggle multiple women. The audio would be the final nail in his coffin. The fallout was swift and brutal. Ryan's employer launched an internal investigation after receiving the package. With multiple witnesses and photographic evidence, they had no choice but to terminate him. The scandal spread through the office like wildfire, tarnishing Ryan's reputation beyond repair. Clara, meanwhile, was devastated. She confronted Ryan with the photos, her voice trembling with rage. How could you? After everything I gave up for you. Ryan's smug mask slipped. It's not what it looks like, he stammered. It's exactly what it looks like, Clara shouted. You're a liar and a cheat. Their engagement ended that night. Clara was left alone, grappling with the consequences of her choices. For Matt, the final act of revenge wasn't satisfaction, it was closure. He had reclaimed his life, stripping away the pain and humiliation Clara and Ryan had inflicted on him. As he sat in his new apartment, flipping through a book, his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. All done. Prescott's officially toast. Drinks on me? Matt smiled faintly, typing a quick reply. On you. I'm in. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, raising it in a silent toast. To freedom, to clarity, and to the strength it took to move on. As the dust settled, Matt found himself in a quieter, more peaceful world. The chaos of betrayal and revenge had subsided, leaving a strange sense of calm. But calm wasn't the same as happiness, and Matt knew his journey wasn't over. His evenings were no longer filled with plots and plans. Instead, he threw himself into work, his new role offering both financial stability and the kind of intellectual challenge he craved. He'd made strides in his professional life, but something was still missing, a sense of fulfillment beyond the spreadsheets and boardroom victories. One afternoon, while grabbing lunch at a nearby cafe, Matt's attention was drawn to a burst of laughter from a corner table. A group of children sat around a woman who seemed to radiate warmth and confidence. Her name, as he would later learn, was Elena Carter, a volunteer at the local youth center. Elena caught his gaze and smiled, an unspoken invitation to join their light-hearted world. It wasn't love at first sight, but something stirred in Matt, a reminder that life wasn't just about pain and survival. He introduced himself after the children left, striking up a conversation that lasted far longer than he'd expected. Elena was witty, grounded, and unflinchingly kind, a stark contrast to the storm Clara had left behind. "You should come by the center," Elena said, handing him a flyer. "We're always looking for volunteers." Matt hesitated, but something in her eyes made him say yes. The youth center became a sanctuary. Matt's evenings were no longer spent brooding in his apartment or drowning his thoughts in bourbon. Instead, he coached basketball, tutored struggling students, and found joy in small victories. A boy mastering his free throws, a girl finally nailing her science project. Elena was there too, her presence both comforting and challenging. She didn't shy away from asking questions, from pushing Matt to open up about his past. Slowly, he shared fragments of his story, the hurt and betrayal he'd endured. "I'm not sure I'll ever trust anyone like that again," Matt admitted one evening, his voice tinged with bitterness. Elena placed a hand on his. "Trust isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about finding someone who makes the risk worth it." Her words stayed with him, their weight shifting something deep within. Months later, while walking through a busy market, Matt spotted Clara. She was standing alone, staring at a bouquet of wilting flowers. She looked different, tired, her once vibrant energy dulled. Their eyes met, and Clara approached hesitantly. "Matt," she began, her voice small. "I didn't expect to see you here." He nodded, his expression neutral. "Clara." They stood in awkward silence before she spoke again. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I know it's too late, but I needed you to hear it." Matt studied her, searching for the anger that once consumed him. It wasn't there anymore. He felt nothing. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "But I've moved on. You should too." Clara nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I hope you're happy, Matt. You deserve it." Life didn't magically fall into place after Clara's apology, but it did feel lighter. With each passing day, Matt allowed himself to hope, to dream, and to rebuild. Elena became a constant in his life, a friend, a confidant, and eventually something more. Their relationship was slow, deliberate, and built on a foundation of mutual respect and trust. For the first time in years, Matt felt like he was moving forward, not just running from the past. Clara, meanwhile, found herself adrift. Ryan's betrayal had left her shaken, and her family's disappointment lingered like a shadow. Her attempts to reconnect with old friends often ended in polite rejection, her reputation following her like a scarlet letter. In the quiet of her small apartment, she replayed the choices that had led her here. The excitement she'd chased with Ryan had turned to ashes, leaving her with nothing but regret. But even in her loneliness, Clara found slivers of redemption. She began attending therapy, working through the patterns and insecurities that had driven her to sabotage her marriage. She reached out to her estranged family, seeking forgiveness and trying to rebuild those bonds. Clara's journey wasn't easy, and it was far from over, but she was learning. Slowly, painfully, she was learning. On a warm spring day, Matt stood at the youth center, watching a group of kids play basketball. Elena was beside him, her laughter mingling with theirs. For the first time in a long while, Matt felt content, not just because Clara and Ryan had faced the consequences of their actions, but because he had reclaimed his own life. "You're smiling," Elena teased, nudging him. "Am I?" Matt replied, his grin widening. "Yes, and it looks good on you." He chuckled, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Maybe I've got something to smile about." Elena leaned into him, her voice soft. "Maybe you do." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of gold and pink, Matt realized that his story wasn't one of betrayal or revenge. It was one of resilience, growth, and the unyielding hope that life, even in its darkest moments, could still be beautiful. Months passed, and the youth center flourished, in part due to Matt's contributions. He wasn't just a volunteer anymore. He was part of the fabric of the community. His growing bond with Elena had become a cornerstone of his new life, one that was filled with purpose and warmth. One evening, as they cleaned up after an event, Elena approached him, her expression serious. "You've come a long way, Matt," she said softly, "but I can still see the shadows." Matt paused, setting down a stack of chairs. "Shadows?" Elena nodded. "You've forgiven yourself, I think, for trusting Clara, for being hurt. But I don't think you've forgiven her, or Ryan, for what they did to you." Matt frowned. "Why should I? They wrecked my life." Elena stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "And yet, you've built something beautiful from the wreckage. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. Let go of the anger, Matt. It's the only way to truly move forward." Her words lingered long after she'd left. That night, Matt sat in his apartment, staring at the flickering light of a single candle. He thought about everything: the betrayal, the revenge, and the life he'd rebuilt. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe it was time to stop looking back. Clara's life had taken a turn for the better, though it was far from perfect. Therapy had become a lifeline, and she was slowly rebuilding bridges with her family. Her father, who had been her fiercest critic after the divorce, now invited her over for Sunday dinners. "It's not easy to admit when you're wrong," her father said one evening, over a plate of roast chicken. "But you've done it. I'm proud of you for that." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." She was still alone, romantically speaking. The scars of her choices made her hesitant to pursue anything serious, but she found fulfillment in other areas. She joined a local book club, started volunteering at an animal shelter, and even began taking art classes. For the first time in years, she was learning to like herself. One morning, as Matt reviewed a grant proposal for the youth center, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, he answered. "Matt, it's Clara." Her voice was soft, almost tentative. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I needed to tell you something." Matt leaned back in his chair, his tone neutral. "Go ahead." I've been in therapy," she began, "and one of the things my therapist suggested was making amends. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know how sorry I am. For everything." Matt was silent for a long moment. "I appreciate that, Clara. It takes courage to say what you just did." Her voice trembled with relief. "Thank you, Matt. That means more than you know." When the call ended, Matt sat in thoughtful silence. He didn't feel anger or resentment, just a strange, unexpected lightness. Elena was waiting for Matt at the youth center that evening, her expression curious. "You're quiet tonight," she remarked as they locked up. "Clara called," Matt said. Elena's brow arched. "Oh, and how do you feel about that?" Matt smiled faintly. "Lighter, like I've let go of something I didn't realize I was still carrying." Elena's smile was warm and full of pride. "I knew you would." Matt reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You were right. About everything." "Thank you." Elena squeezed his hand. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you're finally free." 2 years later, Matt stood in a sunlit park, watching a group of children play soccer. The youth center had grown exponentially, thanks in part to the efforts of its dedicated staff and volunteers. Matt, now co-director, had found not just a career, but a calling. Beside him, Elena held his hand, her laughter echoing as one of the kids tried, and failed, to do a cartwheel. "You know," Matt said, his gaze softening as he looked at her, "I never thought I'd get here. To this place. With you." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden hues over the park, Matt felt a profound sense of peace. His journey had been fraught with pain and anger, but it had also led him to this moment, a moment of joy, love, and endless possibility.